Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. Today I have a special treat for you. I actually brought in someone on the show this time around, and I don't do that often, but sometimes when you run into extraordinary people, you really want to be able to highlight their stories, and this is the Next Level Human podcast. And Mike Lee, who I have on the podcast today, is, in my opinion, one of those extraordinary humans who has an amazing story, is an amazing dude. And I just wanted you to get a sense of, who he is and his work. The first thing to know about him is he is a fighter. And by fighter, I mean literally he's a professional boxer. He has a record of 21-1 and has fought for a world championship. He is, that alone says a lot about the guy. Obviously, you have to have a pretty amazing mindset to reach that level of sport. It's one thing to be a professional athlete. It's another thing to reach a record such as this and actually fight on the national stage. And he's done all of that. And he's going to talk a little bit about his mindset around that and how he was able to accomplish what he accomplished. And it's an amazing, sort of story to listen to the way that he thinks about the world. You're also going to get a really neat glimpse into his visualization practice and how he essentially, when I think about him, I just think of like resilience and resolve. I mean, this is a guy who just, keeps sort of coming back. He went through a very difficult time with his health, and this condition that he had would have pretty much knocked most people out for the rest of their lives. And he was able to overcome that as well. And he's also an amazing businessman, and I would call him a philosopher, which is one of the reasons why I don't know if he would refer to himself that way, but I would call him a philosopher. He's a very deep dude, very humble guy, and you're going to get a lot of value. I do want to say one more thing here, because one of the reasons I so wanted to talk to him as well is that I'm very close with his sister, Angie Lee, who I'm also going to have on this show. And the reason why is because, again, they just have an extraordinary mindset, and I think they're 2 extraordinary people. But one of the things they did is start a company called Soul CBD. MySoulCBD.com is the website. And I began to take this after they sent me some samples. And many of you don't know this, but I suffer from, I have hypothyroid. I was getting some pre-diabetic levels of blood sugars, out of control blood sugars for a while, and also have sleep apnea and don't get much deep sleep. And I never had really taken CBD much, although I had written articles on it and certainly wrote a very popular article for Testosterone Nation on it. And this product has been amazing for me. And so I'm a huge fan of this as well. And so this sort of dovetails into a future episode that I will do strictly on CBD. But I wanted you to also be aware of Mike and Angie and this amazing company they've started. Now, for those of you who are listening to the Next Level Human podcast and Jade Teta, if you have not tried CBD for your health, especially as it pertains to anxiety, inflammatory states, little known things. It is very good for blood sugars. As a matter of fact, it's one of the best things I have tried for blood sugar and, of course, for sleep. You really want to try out this product. And you can go to mysoulcbd.com, use the code Jade Teta, all one word, JADETETA on checkout, and you will get a 20% discount on the product. And I cannot recommend this highly enough. Obviously, you know I don't recommend too many products. This is one that I do, and you're going to get a sense of the kind of human and this company that they started. And by the way, my favorites are the gummies. I'm a little bit of a sweet tooth, a little bit. And so I love the CBD gummies that they have. And my favorite flavor is the strawberry. They also have a coconut vanilla that's pretty amazing as well. And I think they have raspberry and I think an orange as well. But those are my favorite. And of course, some of my good friends who have dogs also love their pet CBD oils. And they have a whole lot more. I use their soothing relief cream as well. But I won't go on and on about how great I think the CBD is. I hope you will try it. And I think you'll be more likely to try it and more in love with this company after you get a sense of this amazing guy, my friend Mike Lee. So let's get started with the show. Yeah, so we were kind of talking about this idea of every single human has their sort of path that they follow, the things that they're good at, the experiences that they've had that sort of make them unique. So I'm most interested in sort of hearing a little bit about your story. One of the things I know about you, and there's a lot I don't know about you, but one of the things that I know about you is you're somebody who has gotten to a very high level in the athletic realm. I mean, to play a professional sport and to be a champion at it and to be fighting for a championship is like, it's like otherworldly, right? It's this thing that, almost no one achieves in their life. And you've been able to achieve that. And at the other end of the extreme, you've also been able to achieve amazing things in sort of the business realm as well. And so my thought process is there's something about the way Mike Lee thinks, right, and acts and behaves and his operating system that is useful for us to kind of learn from. And so I want you to kind of take me back wherever you want to start to kind of be like, all right, Jade, here's where, I started to gnash my teeth. Here's how I got into athletics maybe, or here's the mindset that I have, I feel like might account for some of my success, wherever you want to start.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Right in the beginning, when you started talking, the first thing I thought of is that I don't think, now I'm 32 years old, so I'm a grown ass man, but I don't think we realize that so much of our lives are dictated on our subconscious and are dictated on things that we experience as a child. So one of the first stories that I think of all the time when I think about my athletic career and how did I get to one of the best fighters in the world and fighting for a world title and getting my ass knocked down literally and figuratively and getting back up is I was 8 years old, born and raised in Chicago when I first put on boxing gloves. My father, was born and raised Chicago, grew up very rough, no parents, didn't even graduate high school, was living out of his car, made something of himself and gave me and my sister the life that he never had. So right from the get-go, he was a tough guy. He brought me into a boxing gym, 8 years old, put gloves on me. I'd never fought in my life. Next thing you know, I'm in the ring with a bigger, stronger 10-year-old who had fought before, and I'm getting my ass kicked. I get knocked down, bloody nose. We went 3 full rounds, and I remember being so embarrassed, and I walked into the bathroom. No one was in there. My dad came in after me, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I had a bloody nose. I had a cut lip, and I was crying. And I was thinking at the time, why the hell did my dad do this to me? And I'll never forget, and I can picture it as clearly as, we're sitting here today. He looked at me and he said, Mike, I've never been more proud of you in my life. And I remember that moment so distinctly because I think that was the moment as a young child that I learned that he was proud of me because I didn't give up. The next thing he said after that, because I remember thinking, oh, why'd you say that? This is just a dad, your parent saying good job, even though he's embarrassed for you. He said, Mike, you didn't give up. Round 1, round 2, round 3, you got your ass kicked. I just stood there and watched how you reacted. And you never gave up. You never cried in front of him. and you waited till you got to the bathroom. And it was one of those things that he instilled in me at a young age, that when you get knocked down, you get back up. And the crazy thing is, throughout my entire journey in life, from not only getting to a world title and literally getting knocked down in the ring and how I get back up, but also when I got really, really sick and I was in and out of hospital beds and I was damn near suicidal, that was the time more than ever that I needed that little 8-year-old kid to come out when I said, you know what? Yeah, I got my ass kicked, but I'm not giving up. And it's wild when I look back now as a 32-year-old man to that moment that was so pivotal. And it was probably, less than 5 minutes, but I can picture it so clearly that it always sticks in my mind. And I always kind of go back to that moment of him teaching me that it's not about getting knocked down. It's about not quitting. It's about getting back up.
Man, it's funny, man. That shit gives me goosebumps just hearing it, right? It's like I have this thing that I oftentimes think we humans have these seed stories, I call them. So there's like these stories that get planted in our brain at some point, and a lot of them get planted when we're young, and we don't necessarily know them, and then we pull them out, and they could be useful stories or they could be bad stories. So here you are at 8 years old, in a sense, and one of your seed stories comes out pretty early, because obviously what I heard you saying in there, he distilled something in you prior to that you did sort of get back up. And I'm most interested, though, because I think we can relate to this idea. We see it in movies all the time, where people get knocked down and get back up. But what we don't oftentimes hear about from someone who has been at this level is what actually is going on in your brain. Is it automatic? As a kid, what were you telling yourself? Because obviously, if you're just like, there's this thing that happens, right, when we get knocked down as humans, and like there has to be some kind of thought process, maybe, I don't know, that goes in your brain that says, like, what are you saying to yourself, or what is the thing that is going on in your brain? And I know it's sort of tough, but I'm always so interested in that. Like, what's going on in the background? Is it really as simple as like, the Rocky music playing in the background and all of a sudden like you jump up and you're ready to fight? Or is there something that you're doing prior to and during these times when you're getting your ass beat?
Well, going back to your subconscious ruling, and I'm, big Tony Robbins fan. I know he always talks about like, whose love did you seek growing up? And for me, it was always my father. And the way that I felt like I got love out of him was if I won. So I became a great athlete because of it. And for better or worse, it got me to, one of the best athletes in the world in my respective field. But I think that what's going on in my mind during those moments is just win. Just win, and kind of pushing through pain and doing whatever it takes to win. So I think at that moment as a little kid, I didn't want to give up because I didn't want to embarrass him and I didn't want to let him down. And then that started, forming my subconscious into, okay, I don't want to embarrass myself. No matter what, I want to give it everything I got. And so even when I'm in the ring, my last fight, there's 20,000 people, MGM Grand, world title. I get knocked down on my ass multiple times. I got back up every single time until the ref actually stopped the fight for me, protecting myself from myself, because something was instilled in me that I'm like, do whatever it takes to get up. And I always say this, when you get knocked down in the ring, the toughest time is to step up again, literally go from the ground to your knee to back up, because you're not right. Like, it takes a long time for your legs to get right, your head to get right. And that, okay, he's going to come after me and I'm going to have to survive here. So that little quick step up from the knee to your feet is such a long distance, but a short distance, if you know what I'm saying. And so I think what's going through my mind during that time is just win under no matter what it takes. And I kind of zone everything out. So I don't really have Rocky music playing. I think when you're in those moments, things are moving so fast that a lot of it's just muscle memory. But at the end of the day, I think how hard you want to go is all built on your subconscious. How much pain you're willing to endure to win is all built on your philosophies on life. I mean, even watching the Michael Jordan documentary, Last Dance, you saw that dude would do anything to win. And listen, I'm not comparing myself to MJ in any way, but being a kid from Chicago, I grew up idolizing MJ, and I saw that in him. So I thought, for me, what I wanted to be was a version of that. And for me, for Mike Lee, that was do whatever it takes to win. for better or worse.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I'll share this with you because you're a fighter. So I bounced in college. I was a bouncer. And I didn't realize this until later, but there's this one fight that I was in. And by the way, I was always fighting. I thought I was a badass until I looked back and was like, dude, you were sober and you were fighting a bunch of drunk dudes, right? And I had no training whatsoever. But I do remember I had never really been hit, right? And I remember this one time where I got hit. And I literally was like just completely backed off this dude. Now, luckily, it didn't look like it did. I could save face because people kind of jumped in and everything. But I remember that thought process. I was like, wow, I have actually never been hit. And my mindset, it was an embarrassing moment for me and a wake up call for me because in a sense, I was like, I don't want that again. That's never actually happened. And I oftentimes thought to myself, I'm like, that's because you never actually got hit that hard. Everyone else that you were dealing with was drunk and couldn't hit you, couldn't even see you. You were like double and triple. But this dude, much smaller guy than me too at the time, who actually knew how to fight and I didn't, right? And I had no idea, which is a problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I got popped and basically I think I was out, but I was standing up. So I don't know if that's even possible. I can ask a real fighter. Okay. Yeah. So for me, I got hit and I didn't know where the hell I was, but I was basically up. And I just remember being like, I do not want to walk forward again. Yeah. And I oftentimes thought to myself, and I guess I'll ask you because it's just an interesting thing. I've never really been able to talk to a professional fighter about this, but I always thought to myself, that's because you never really got hit, Jade. Like you never trained to get hit. You were always the one who was, and I think that was the beginning of my understanding of like, oh, you've been fighting drunk dudes this whole time. And now you actually get, you start fighting someone that actually knows how to throw a punch. Because, probably for you as a fighter, you're watching, maybe you have watched a bar fight and you're just like, these dudes are just throwing haymakers. They don't know what they're doing, which was probably me when, kind of coming up. And then I got hit and I was thinking, I guess the saying that comes to mind is you kind of rise to your training, right? And I didn't actually have that training. And so part of the thing that I want to kind of get into with you is I oftentimes see this, and you even see it now on social media, and you see different people who are trying to be the expert, but they've never actually been hit or actually done the work to kind of be the expert. And they are showing up, which I guess we would say that's good that you're showing up. But then there's something that I think has to happen that I would just want to explore with you is like something has to happen at some point where you go, okay, I'm going to get better at this, or I'm going to sort of move away from this. And ironically, about 3 months later after that, I got into a fight and almost killed this dude and split my hand wide open and did a bunch of stuff that I was just like, I don't want to do this sort of thing anymore. And it kind of moved me in a different direction. But I'm very curious about this sort of idea of like you rise to the level of your training versus just rising to the occasion. And I'm curious how that sort of manifests in your life in fighting, and if you feel like that's true, and also how it's manifested in other things that you've done outside of fighting. Because, right, you've been fighting, and now you're pivoting into other things that you're becoming very successful at. And I'm wondering how you've transitioned that training. Like the mindset has followed you, and what happens like when you don't necessarily know about, internet business in certain areas. What do you do, right?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, first of all, experience is everything. And the only way you're going to get experience is by jumping in the ring, whether you're running a business, whether you're getting into sports, whether, it doesn't matter what it is. When I say jump in the ring, obviously, I mean, literally and figuratively for me. But I think I've learned more from getting knocked down and getting punched in the face in boxing and in athletics, and also my business, starting a CBD business and starting a business before that failed. We lost, all our money. I learned more from those experiences than I ever did from the wins too. Like, honestly, and that may sound corny, but it's the dead honest truth. And I think one of the things that made me successful in the ring and, in other endeavors in life so far, is that I'm willing to get punched in the face. Given what I do every single night I go out there, I had 22 professional fights. I'm 21-1 right now. There is a real chance that I'll die. 4 fighters died in the ring last year alone. A couple of them top level fighters. I know one of their trainers. That's a real possibility, but I don't want to say low risk, high reward, but it's one of those things that I was willing to risk and put everything on the line to achieve what I wanted to achieve. Now, is that an extreme circumstance, risking your life? Absolutely. But I think that people play shit so safe that they don't realize what they have in them. You know, for instance, I was scared to death early in my career of what would happen when I got knocked down first, because I had never been knocked to the floor in an actual fight. So 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, I'm undefeated, young professional fighter. I get my first fight on ESPN. I think I'm the shit, but I'm scared. I'm a scared little boy inside in the dressing rooms because I'm like, what is actually going to happen when I get hit so hard that I get hit to the floor? I get hit to the mat. And I always was insecure about that. And sure enough, my 7th professional fight, this is wild. We put together the first professional fight in Notre Dame's history. Notre Dame's my alma mater. We had a ring in the middle of the basketball arena. Regis Philbin was the MC. All the football players and Mike Bray, the basketball coach, was out there. Condoleezza Rice was there because she was a Notre Dame grad. So it was kind of like a homecoming fight for me, right? Yeah. I was 7-0 at the time. Of all fights, that was the first fight I got knocked on my ass. In the 3rd round of that fight, you know, thousands of people in attendance, I got hit with a left hook, and all of a sudden, I'm on the ground. And I remember thinking, why am I staring at the ref's shoes? It was literally that fast, right? And because it's the shots that hurt the most are the ones you don't see. Like, honestly, in life, but also in boxing. Yeah. Any fighter will tell you that. So I'm on the mat, and I ended up getting up to my knee, getting up at the count of 9, just beat the count, and just barely got through that round. I sat back on the stool. Round 4 or 5 came up. I forgot which one it was, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm feeling good, but I got to win this fight, you know? I ended up coming out, collecting myself, staying calm, cool, collected. I ended up breaking his ribs and getting a win and staying undefeated, right? I tell that story because...
That's a badass story.
Well, dude, I'm glad it happened because... I learned more about myself as a fighter, as a human being, my spirit, my athleticism. That fight, getting knocked down, embarrassed on my home turf in front of thousands of people, I learned more getting knocked down that fight than I ever did. I came into the next 13 fights with more confidence than I ever had because that insecurity in the dressing room went away. That insecurity of, am I gonna wuss out and bail when shit gets tough? I didn't. I stayed calm, and I didn't know until that happened to me. So it was really that moment that changed who I was as a fighter. And you know, even my last fight, I mean, shit, I lost. I got knocked out, but every time I got knocked down, I knew when I hit the mat, okay, I can get up because I've done it before. So I think my one advice for people is like, fall on your face, man. Try shit out. That's the only way you're going to learn. You can do master classes. You can read books. You can watch movies. Man, the only way to learn is experience, man. Experience is everything.
I love that, man. I love that so much. And it reminds me of that saying, and a lot of people have heard this, but it's basically a lot of people go ready, aim, fire, right? So we all, in entrepreneurship, sometimes they say fire, then aim, and that's sort of what you're talking about. But here's an interesting thing about this. You know, so I'm big into philosophy, and the Stoics have this thing they call premeditatio malorum, which basically means negative visualization. And so part of what they believe is that if you can think of the worst thing that happens, you will prepare for it. So I'm wondering for you, did you, like when you're in that scared little boy in the locker room, did you ever have this thing where you like played it out in your brain, like visualized like yourself getting knocked down and practicing getting back up? Was there anything that you did like that kind of made you go, okay, I may not have actually had it happen to me physically, but I practiced this mentally? I'm just curious.
No, I mean, that's a great question. I never did that. And I think maybe because I was scared, I didn't even want to think about that. When I did visualization, I got heavy into visualization after working with some sports psychologists early in my career. We could talk about that too, but I never visualized the negative. I only visualized the positive. I do agree with what you're saying in the standpoint of like, most of the time when you think about worst case scenario, it's not actually that bad, right? But for me, when I thought about getting knocked out and losing, that was the worst case scenario ever. So it almost motivated me to train harder. I'll tell you, throughout my entire career, I was never afraid of getting hurt. I was never afraid of, the broken nose, broken rib, broken hands, everything I've gone through. I was never afraid of that. I was more afraid of losing. than anything. I was more afraid of being embarrassed than anything. So I didn't try to like visualize that. But early in my career, I did do a lot of visualization. And it helped tremendously. I would close my eyes and literally think of what it looked like, what it would smell like, what the blood would taste like, what the sweat would taste like. Every single fight, I did it in training camp hundreds of times. And I'm telling you, when I started doing this, I would step in the ring and I felt like I was there hundreds of times already. It was wild. It calmed me down in the dressing room. It calmed me down during the fight. I really think for myself, it's how I got to, 21 straight victories. It helped me so much in calming myself down. And obviously, I'm sure you know more than anybody, like there's actual clinical data and studies now proving how much mindset and visualization, will dictate your body, everything between slowing your heart rate down to actual performance. So that was a huge thing for me throughout my career that I did.
I definitely want to hear your process. And actually, it's really interesting because it reminds me of they did a series of studies. They've done many studies, but the one that sticks out to me is this basketball study. Have you heard about this shooting free throws?
No.
So basically what they would do is they brought college kids in and they basically took one group and said, they tested their free throw accuracy first, right? So they said, everyone just get up and shoot your free throws. Let's see how many you can get in like a minute per se, let's say. And then one group, they said, every week you're going to come in and practice shooting free throws. The other group, they actually stuck up in the stands and said, you're going to sit up there and imagine shooting free throws. Then there was a third group that did both and a fourth group that did none of that. Right. So one group basically came in, shot free throws, went home, never came back to the lab until they were retested. Another group came in and every week would shoot free throws. Another group came in and sat in the stand and imagined shooting free throws. Then there was another group that did both, basically. And what they showed is that the group that was thinking about shooting free throws and the ones that were actually shooting free throws, the ones who were actually shooting free throws did do a little bit better, but the ones who were just thinking about shooting free throws actually did phenomenally well, much better than the ones who were sitting home doing nothing. And then, of course, the group that was doing both shooting and thinking, performed the best. And so what this actually shows is exactly what you have said, that it's basically like your brain, when you're imagining it and you're dreaming it, you can, in a sense, correct your skills. Your brain is sort of priming itself for this. So what I want to do, since I have you, I would love for you to just walk us through, like, how does someone who's never done this, like, how do they actually do this sort of practice?
Well, I'll tell you how I do it and, what I've learned from different guys and what's kind of worked for me, because most of your listeners aren't going to be hopping in a ring, thank God, and fighting another human being. But at the end of the day, it all correlates to the same thing, whether you're giving a big speech or anything it is. And let me be clear, I'm not saying when I do visualization that this is like the manifestation type stuff. I'm not saying that's not true, for instance, but this isn't where I have a vision board of a Ferrari and a house on the beach and then all of a sudden it comes true. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But for me, all I know is it was a very specific visualization where, sometimes it'd be 5 minutes, sometimes it'd even be 2 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. It was almost like a meditation where I would close my eyes, maybe after training, maybe I got home. A couple times I would do it in the car when I got done with sparring and thinking about what I was doing and the fight coming up. But I would know, okay, for instance, I had a big fight at Madison Square Garden once when I was 11-0. I think I was 27 years old at the time. I was so damn nervous and excited at the same time. So that fight especially, I would close my eyes and I would visualize everything from start to finish when I got in the dressing room. And granted, I'd never been in the dressing room. I'd never been in Madison Square Garden, actually, but I knew on TV what it looked like, right? And I knew what a fight smelled like and tasted like. So I would just close my eyes, and for a few minutes, I would run through the scenario. I would go through, okay, we're getting in the dressing room, got to do a little bit of media, then we stretch out. I would think of everything in extreme detail, right? What my trainer was wearing, what the locker room smelled like, what the tape felt like. I would literally transport myself, and it was kind of like a fun game I would play. So I didn't put too much stress on it other than let's play this movie out. And every time I played the movie, I'd win. And I don't know how important that is. You talked about negative visualization. I'm sure, whatever people want to do in that scenario. But I would basically go into all 5 senses, what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it tasted like, what it sounded like, what it felt like. And I would walk through everything, walking out of the tunnel, the Madison Square Garden, looking at people, keeping my heart rate low, keeping a smile on my face, saying my mantra, which was have fun, baby. Every fight I would say have fun. And I would go through and literally walk through, okay, round 1. Okay, maybe that wasn't a great round. I'm going to come back. How do I readjust? And I would just have fun with it. And I think what was happening is I was putting my mind through that scenario so many times that my body then reacted like I'd been there 100 times. So what I tell people to start out with is whatever it is in their life that makes them nervous, maybe it's their health, maybe it's something they want to change, play that movie in your head. Start playing that game. Close your eyes and picture with very bright, for me, so bright colors, so it's not dim, so it's a illuminated thing. Extreme detail, that's very important. And keep a smile on your face and think about how you want that to play out. And wherever your mind takes you, then react to that, Like there'd be rounds where I'd get hit or I'd get knocked down and then I'd get back up. But I'd always react and I'd always win that fight. And that process, I don't know what it was. It just made me feel so comfortable. I went from being a scared to death little boy in the dressing room to laughing, having fun. And it changed my mindset on everything.
Dude, I love this so much. Actually, it's funny. When I first wanted to become an author, I did the same kind of thing. And I would imagine myself in detail, just like you, in detail. I would imagine myself walking into the publishers in New York City, sitting around this big sort of table, the things that they would say, the way it smelled, all the textures and sounds. Even down to the point, this is so funny, even down to the point where my brother Keone and I, after we got the deal in my head, we are sitting in a pizza shop and we're having our celebratory meal. And I kid you not, it was almost like deja vu when that happened. And I'm sitting there and it hits me all of a sudden. I'm like, holy shit, man, I've been here. I've literally been here, like literally this round table, all these people sort of around. So it's such a powerful thing. And at first glance, right, it sounds woo-woo and it sounds like, what are you guys talking about? But on the other end of things, every single time you get into talking to people who are successful, in my mind, when they have some variation of this. Ours is so similar to the way we visualize, actually. But I've talked to people who do it in very sort of different ways. Like I've talked to people who set an intention when they go to bed that I'm going to dream about my success. I've talked to people who just look in the mirror and do sort of positive affirmations. Like, what's that? I think it's Any Given Sunday. Was it Any Given Sunday? And where the receiver's looking in the mirror and he's like, I'm the best damn wide receiver in the world. Like that. Some people do it that way. Yeah. But I think everyone has a way of talking to themselves in that. And I think you and I, sounds like we're kind of schooled in the same kind of thing. And I don't know where I picked up that method, but my method is very similar. And for those of you who are listening, one of the things that Mike said that I thought is very telling and interesting, and it's kind of what I do too, is notice how he's like tasting the sweat, feeling the blood on his face. He's giving it texture and smell and the feeling of the tape on his hand. So it's not just positive thought. It's actually feeling and putting yourself in that feeling place. And I think that's part of the thing that sort of people miss. And then I would just say, Next Level Human is about those 4 jobs. So obviously health and fitness is one job, finance is another job, personal relationships is another, and then purpose and meaning is a 4th job. And so obviously we have different goals in these different things. Like you and I are both now really heavily immersed in our finance, career, sort of entrepreneurial job. And so are you doing visualization in that realm too now, around money and stuff like that, or not?
Absolutely. I mean, I do it around things I want for my business, right? Or moments that I feel like might intimidate me. So it's kind of the same concept. And if anything, I mean, maybe this can sound a little woo-woo, but I always say this. I think it's an interesting point. A little bit, it's kind of undeniable. We give ourselves heart attacks and damage our body just on stress alone, right? I mean, I think that's kind of a universal truth that stress alone gives us heart attacks. It's terrible for your immune system, terrible for your body, right? So if that's basically negative visualizations, constant negative perpetual thoughts in your head that can kill you, literally kill you. So who's to say the opposite can't happen, right? Who's to say that you can't start healing yourself and your body can start reacting differently if we know that you can kill yourself just by thinking of something, thinking of a stress that isn't even physically there. The saber-toothed tiger isn't even in front of you, but your body is still reacting in that sympathetic, constant sympathetic state that's damaging. So, I mean, that's the one thing I think that I want to say that I wish I heard at first when I was hesitant about the visualization woo-woo stuff.
That is so well said, man. Such a great way to say it. And actually, this is one thing before we switch gears here is that whole idea of the Stoic philosophers, premeditatio malorum. You actually, when Mike was telling the story, you guys hear how he did get hit. Maybe he even got knocked down in his visualization. So that's the negative visualization that you do in your visualization. You might have some negative things happen, but the response is positive, right? So it's just like I can actually recover sort of from this. And so that's sort of how they do it. So one of the powerful things about visualization would be, for example, when I was visualizing my book deal and stuff like that, I would, the sort of thing we hear about certain writers or the Beatles or who's the one that wrote the Harry Potter?
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling and how often they got turned down. And so part of that negative visualization is that I will get back up, right? So it's the get back up and that mindset of like, okay, this might not work out, but I'm going to keep going. It sounds like we were both doing that as well. So I think it's like, it's that idea of maybe, I just thought that was interesting because I would think of this could go wrong and I'm going to do this about it. And it sounds like you're actually doing that as well, which is kind of, so that whole Stoic idea is not so much to say things are going to go bad and you need to think about bad stuff. It's more like things are going to go bad and how are you going to turn it and make it positive in your head? It's part of kind of what you're talking about. So, I mean, I want to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about what are the things, for you right now, you're out of the sports arena now. I mean, or are you planning on, is it kind of up in the air? Are you going to sort of get back into it? I mean, 21-1, I mean, that's a fantastic record. And you obviously are not old and could still compete. So maybe there's part of you that still wants to do that. I don't know.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, I started building, this company, Soul CBD, for a while, and it really is quenched my thirst, so to speak, of competitiveness and building something and helping people and all that. But I still have that itch. I do. So I haven't officially retired yet, but I had a long career. And I think that whether I continue fighting or not, I want my health to be the most important thing. So that's really what I'm sitting back. And right now, especially with, COVID and quarantine, everything's on hold right now. So I've just been focusing mostly on the business side.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you about your company because one of the things that I see, it's one of my major interests in you as well, is that one of the things I think we both see from sort of getting to know you is that, look, stress, you mentioned it, like people are so stressed out. They don't have the tool set. Right now, we're dealing with this SARS-CoV-2 virus, like you say, and it's like it's even worse for people. And we don't have many tools at all to sort of put ourselves in that parasympathetic state to almost give us like a little bit of a security blanket. From my perspective, CBD is one of those things. It's one of those things that is very rare in the world, in that this is something that can actually aid you and take the edge off and actually put you in a sympathetic state. Before we started recording, you and I were talking about heart rate variability, this idea of sympathetic versus parasympathetic dominance and how to measure that. We now have the tools to do that. Like back when I was playing sports and maybe back when you first started boxing, we didn't have that ability to say, how are we recovering from stress? Now we kind of do. And since I've been taking CBD, I've actually been using your product. Since I've been taking CBD, it makes a big difference in that HRV and my ability to recover. So I'm just interested in you talking a little bit about how you used it, why you settled on CBD, because there's a lot of different angles you could have gone in terms of supplements and stuff like that, and just the story behind it.
Yeah, so the story's kind of a wild one, and another one of like blessings out of some terrible situations. But I was 12-0, undefeated, about 26 years old, and really at the height of my career. I was in the peak of my prime of my career, feeling great, feeling I was undefeated, feeling really confident. I had a bunch of Subway commercials. I was just all over the country. I fought in Madison Square Garden, all these places, and all of a sudden I started getting really sick. We had a big fight. It was going to be my first HBO undercard and my 13th fight scheduled. And about 2 weeks before, we had a media workout. And I woke up that day in incredible pain, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and it just started getting worse and worse to the point where during one of those workouts, I had to run into the bathroom because I was in so much pain. I thought I was going to pass out. So needless to say, a couple days later, we ended up canceling the fight. And I spent the next almost 2 years in and out of hospitals battling what we found out later was an autoimmune disease known as ankylosing spondylitis, as well as a few other things that started popping up. It was the darkest, most painful time of my life because not only was boxing and this love I had for the sport taken from me, but I was in significant pain. I was getting headaches, back pain, chronic fatigue. I was completely depressed, anxiety through the roof. I was on 8 different medications, man. And the problem with these autoimmune diseases is so often it's very common for people to be undiagnosed for years and years, right? So I didn't know this at the time. So you go to every single doctor and, if that doctor has a hammer, then your problem looks like a nail. It's like that analogy. And so I just started realizing that going from doctor to doctor, and at one point I was in a hospital bed for like 12 days straight, hooked up to IVs, because I was having these major anxiety attacks. I was completely addicted to painkillers. I was literally laying in hospital beds and then watching myself on TV and some of these commercials. And I was on antidepressants and anti-anxiety. And I remember thinking, this can't be it. I think a doctor came in and they were talking about trying one more medication. It was going to be number 9 for me, and I was already on 8. And it was one of those breaking points, man. It was my rock bottom, dude. I was literally thinking about taking an entire bottle of painkillers and just being out of it. And I decided that I was going to take my health into my own hands. And I started getting obsessed with health and wellness. I knew nothing about it before. I started researching about diet, about mindset. I started reading books by Dr. Joe Dispenza and Tony Robbins, and going to Tony Robbins seminars, and learning everything from mind to body, and changing my nutrition completely. Started meditating, started visualizing so much more, not only boxing, but my health. But at the end of the day, I went from 8 medications all the way down to 0. And I went from doctors telling me that I was done fighting to I just fought for a world title in July. And yeah, I got my ass kicked and I got knocked out, but I got to 21-0, ranked 3rd in the world, and won 9 more fights from those hospital beds. Now, I say that to inspire people because there's millions of people that have autoimmune diseases. There's millions of people that wake up in pain, and I still deal with pain every day, and I'm working on it. But I say that to inspire people because I read stories like that inspired me, that let me not give up and made me not take that bottle of pills and took me out of those darkest moments in my life. So I love telling this message, not to say, oh, look at me, but to say that there's always a way out if you change your mindset, right? And at that moment, yeah, the cards were dealt. I couldn't change the cards, but how I played them is what I could change. I decided to play them differently, man. I decided to take my health into my own hands and change my life completely. And I really changed as a human being. I became so much more empathetic, and I just started diving into health and nutrition. And that's how I discovered CBD too. And CBD for me, first of all, started with pain and anxiety, which we know now it activates the endocannabinoid system, which affects so many things throughout your nervous system and your body. And we're still learning more and more. But for me, the pain and anxiety were 2 markers that I really needed help with, and it helped me significantly. And I always tell people this, it was never, it was one of the big puzzle pieces, so to speak. I don't go out there and say, I was on 8 different medications. I took 1 tincture of CBD and I was cured, and then I fought for a world title. Like, I don't lie to people. There were a lot of things that got me out of those hospital beds and have gotten me to the point I am today. But CBD was one of them, man. And I fell in love with it. And especially for me being an athlete, I get drug tested. So I needed to find something that didn't have THC in it and that I could perform and heal and get better. And I started taking it more and more. And I remember calling up my sister, Angie Lee, who's my co-founder, and being like, you got to try this stuff. It's incredible. Because she was with me in all those hospital beds, man. Like, she's my rock. She's like my best friend. She would literally lay there when I was crying because I was in pain and embarrassed in these hospital beds, and she'd be there to cheer me up. And so I remember, she's been through this journey with me so long, and I remember calling her, telling her about this, and that was the birth of the company, man. And we started it as a side hustle, and less than 2 years later, we've helped thousands of people, and The company's grown incredibly, and it's wild what it's turned into. And I'm so grateful. As painful as those times were, it changed me as a human being forever. And I now have this beautiful relationship with my sister. I have this amazing company that helps people. We get DMs every single day about how it helps people out. And so now I'm an advocate of looking into all natural sources. You know, maybe it's CBD, maybe it's diet, maybe it's mindset, but Western medicine has its place.
Yeah.
It helps people. It helped me a lot, but it's not the end all be all. So I encourage people to find out what works for them, you know, because it doesn't have to be all pain and all medications.
Yeah.
And that's how I got here today, man.
Dude, that's an amazing story, and it's funny because I've actually been sharing with Mike. I got their CBD product, and well, first of all, my girlfriend stole you sent me a little one. You're like, hey Jay, try this. I think Angie sent it to me, and it was like a little vial of CBD for dogs.
Yeah,
and she took that, and like she's like, oh my, her little dog is so cute. It's a little white Yorkshire Terrier, but it barks like crazy, and it's just been diagnosed with cancer, poor thing. So, but it's going through treatment, but it's the only thing that's ever calmed that dog. Now she absolutely loves it. And one of the things that was shocking to me, because, you know, probably for you too, being a lot of us who are listening to this, there's a lot of stuff that you take in the health and fitness world. And for me, this might be surprising to a lot of people, but I have blood sugar issues, like pre-diabetes. So a lot of people are like, what, dude, you're a naturopath physician, you work out. Like, why is that? Actually, what's really surprising me, I started taking CBD for sleep. What I've noticed is that one of the most profound things that it's done is help my blood sugar. And I've actually been, I sometimes wear a continuous glucose monitor, and I've been watching sort of how that has been, I would say probably the best thing, second to berberine, which is another compound that helps blood sugar. It's really interesting, right? Because it's not something that most people think about when they think of CBD.
No, it's not.
Yeah, but there's some research coming out, which is so it's just for me to kind of say it's kind of like, not only is it an amazing story, but it's funny because diabetes is one of the biggest issues, and a lot of people cannot solve their blood sugar levels. One of the interesting things about blood sugar is it can come from food and it can come from stress. And so when it's coming from stress, CBD seems to be the thing. And I think that's what it is for me. It's not necessarily because I eat such a shitty diet. It's more that I get this sort of increased stress hormone production that just kind of runs sort of wild, and CBD has been sort of amazing for that. So it's really interesting, that particular product that you kind of stumbled across that. And I guess the thing I'd say about this, and then I'll get your thoughts on this and then we can wrap up. But here's what I find interesting as we're listening to Mike. There's this thread, and I think this is for all of us, and this is really about what it is with Next Level Human. There's this sort of thread that if you are listening to his story, that you get these sort of points, these pain points, that then you sort of rise from, and sort of react to in a particular way. And I can't even imagine what having AS and going through that whole process. For those of you who don't know, ankylosing spondylitis, usually it affects the lower lumbar vertebrae and can be, it can progress to the point where you really can't bend side to side. So imagine a boxer, all of you, like getting this, and the mindset that you must have been in, being like, I'm not going to be able to pivot. I'm not going to be able to bend over and touch my shoes, and then going through this whole process. And there's this thing that happens where you, this sort of redemption story. And I think we humans love that redemption story more than anything else. But it does take that choice point that you seem to make at multiple times, even when you're telling a story about getting knocked down. And it's literally a choice that then you get back up, that you probably are practicing through visualization, through your dad talking to you, through your sister being there, through your own internal sort of dialogue that I'm going to sort of keep going. So it's almost like when I'm listening to your story, I'm like, dude, this is like the resilience guy. Like this, like he needs to get like resilience and resolve like tattooed on him somewhere. Cause it's like constantly getting, in these places and then getting knocked down and then having to crawl back up again. Yeah. So I just want to kind of get your final thoughts and things that you want to sort of leave us with, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, man. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think that one thing I was thinking about getting a possible tattoo, and I say all the time, is pain is a gift. And when you first say that, people are usually like, what are you talking about? But one thing my life has taught me so far, and listen, there's so many more people that have gone through more pain than I have, but it's all relative, right? But pain is a gift. And if you look at some of the most successful human beings out there in athletics, it doesn't matter in what field, they became successful not despite pain, but because of it. It molded who they were as a human being. I know that's true for me, but why I say that now is because I'm sure people listening are dealing with pain now in their current life. And same, I'm not done with dealing pain. I'll have the rest of my life. Your life is about pain, but life has a lot of pain in it rather, but it's all about your mindset in that moment. Right? Once again, I talked about the cards you're dealt. It's all about how you play it. So it's understanding in that moment that really the only true freedom you have is, how do I react to this? You can never control what comes in, the type of pain, a disease you get hit by a car, a loss of a loved one. You can never control that shit. All you can control is how you react to it. The only thing you can control in this life is your mindset around it. And is it something that is going to crush you and end you, or are you going to find a positive outcome out of it? And that's why I always say pain is a gift, because if you choose to make it a gift, no matter how much the pain is, you live your life very differently. And those are the words that I needed to hear when I was in my darkest moments. And those are the words that I hope someone else hears when they're in their darkest moments.
Dude, you're such a gift, such a humble dude, man. Love your mindset. Thanks for being here, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here for this episode. I hope you loved that conversation as much as I did and got a ton out of it. I want to tell you where you can find Mike. He is on Instagram at official Mike Lee. You also can go over to Mike's website, and that website is MikeLeeBoxing.com. And also check out his company, MySoulCBD.com. And remember, you get a 20% discount using the code Jade Teta on those products. They are amazing. I'm going to do a whole episode on CBD as well. But if you're dealing with anxiety, blood sugar related issues, actually one of the things I'll cover when I talk about CBD is the idea that it may actually down-regulate, when it's used chronically, some of the hunger centers in the brain. And so we may be seeing this used for weight loss as well. But this is something that you can definitely try, and I think their company, Mike and Angie's company, is the best out there. So thanks so much for being here, and I will see you at the next episode.